Mike Huckabee spent last night sending out a series of extremely embarrassing tweets, perhaps trying to court the few remaining right-wing racist voters who haven't already pledged support for Donald Trump. First off, he started after the question about do Black Lives Matter or all lives matter. He said, racism exists because we have a sin problem in America, not a skin problem. I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
Oh, that's so clever.
Wait, who is the sinner?
The racist, like you.
Exactly. No, I would hope that that's what he means, but it's lost there in his wordplay. That's not a solution to the problem, identifying, okay, so you're saying they're sinful as opposed to just racist. Okay, we still have to do something about it.
And even if they're...
And he doesn't want to.
Even if they're sinful about their racism, they're racist, and hence they are doing it because of the color of the skin of the other person.
And he's
so
also,
it's still a skin problem.
He's also saying there that, oh, stop focusing so much on people's skin color. Stop focusing on racism, focus instead on sin. Stop focusing on something that we can demonstrate exactly how this hurts people and how it actually functions and what we might be able to do to fix it. Instead, talk about some sort of protoplasm, some sort of ethereal concept that we can't actually do anything about because it exists only in the minds of angels. That's why he wants to talk about that. And he's free to talk about that in a goddamn church, but he's running for president. That's the unfortunate part. But more offensive than the racism stuff, he then turned to some animals. He said, I trust Bernie Sanders with my tax dollars like I trust a North Korean chef with my labrador.
Jeez, Lord mercy. I'm surprised he didn't call him Chinaman.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I get what he's doing there. Yeah, his entire the series of tweets was rife with stuff that was probably in some sort of cheap stand-up act from the 1990s.
1950s.
Yeah. Maybe. No, there were some backwards comedians even in the 90s, I guess. Yeah, so he was attacked on that. And what I love about his defense of himself is it's very reminiscent of Ann Coulter's defense during your recent debate with her. He said, leave it to liberals to ignore injustices and atrocities of a totalitarian nation on human beings and put more importance on a nation's diet, which includes grass clippings and canines.
No, but okay, and he also wrote in another tweet.
Stop defending dictators, Cenk.
Exactly. He said, poor liberals think it's racist to deplore a brutal dictatorship. No, but you see, the stereotype isn't that Kim Jong-un eats dogs. It's that Koreans eat dogs.
Yeah.
And that's a stereotype that goes back to the Korean War and when we did propaganda against the North Koreans. Now, you want to say that North Korean dictatorship and leadership is wrong. There's no argument whatsoever. Everybody agrees. I think almost 100% of the country agrees with that. Liberals are probably angry at Kim Jong-un than you are because he's abusing human rights, depriving his own people, and he's authoritarian. You guys kind of like authoritarians. You think Putin's strong and all that stuff, right? So there's a part of conservatives who are like, ooh, Kim Jong-un. Ooh, that's a pretty good strength he's got there, right? Yeah. So we're all agreed on that, you schmuck. So don't misdirect. You made a joke about the people, not about their dictator, okay? Yeah. Dictator jokes, have at it, Hoss, right? But you made a racial joke about the people in North Korea. Yeah. So don't try to hide it and misdirect it.
That's the weakness and the cowardice of saying, oh, you're talking about this other general thing. It's the clitorectomies that Ann Coulter was talking about. No, we know exactly what we're talking about. You apparently have the boldness to say it in a tweet, but not to actually stand up to criticism of what you said. He went on to say, facts, North Koreans eat dog, and Bernie Sanders wants to spend $18 trillion of your money. What's so hard to understand? Poor liberals, no sense of humor, no sense of reality. One thing that's hard to understand is why you continue to throw around that $18 trillion fact that has already been disproven. 15 trillion of those dollars are the dollars that we would already spend on healthcare over the course of a decade, not additional spending that Bernie Sanders wants to spend. It's simply the spending that is already going on that we would put in a different direction. But they keep throwing around the number. Okay, Jeb Bush wants to spend $100 bajillion. Donald Trump's tax plan would cost us $3 cojillion. I'm just going to keep saying it. Maybe it'll end up on Huffington Post.
By the way, another trick from Ann Coulter's bag of tricks to say, liberals have no sense of humor. Wait, no, but let's be clear. Are you joking or are you not joking? Because now you've made 3 different references to how North Koreans do actually eat dogs.
Yes.
So then you're not joking. So what do you mean they have no sense of humor?
Yeah.
Right? Another misdirection. Like, oh, yeah, I'm going to say something horrible. if you're offended by it, I'm going to pretend I'm joking. If you actually secretly love what I said against Asians, then I wasn't joking. They really do eat dogs.
Serious, yeah.
Haha, liberals. Yeah, I got those Asians, right?
That's the dark side of my policy, and I think you have a similar one, of wanting to give people a lot of leeway if they're comedians. It's that jackasses who are not remotely interested in comedy will use that as a shield to protect against the criticism of the things they actually believe that are horrendous.
Finally, let us get to the irony of Mike Huckabee talking about eating dogs and abusing dogs. Because back in 1998, his son David apparently hung a stray dog from a tree until it died while he was working as a summer camp counselor. Now, the sins of the son shall not also be passed on to the father, but the father, with his power in his home state, because remember he was the governor of Arkansas, was accused on leaning on local officials to prevent an animal cruelty charge against his son.
Yeah.
So you went out of your way, used and perhaps abused your power to make sure someone who killed a dog cruelly in an unbelievable way got away with it. Now you have the nerve to make dog jokes?
Yeah.
Okay, you're the Michael Vick of the Republican Party, and then you're going around talking about how Asians eat dogs.
Yeah. So I looked into it. I mean, the problem is that if what he did is making sure that there's no actual investigation, the problem with that is that then there's not a lot of information. So I looked in and tried to find out as much as I could. The dog, that did happen. The dog did get hung. The actual reasons why it happened, it's impossible to say because the investigation was stopped.
Is there a good reason for hanging a dog from a tree?
No, definitely not. I'm just saying I wanted to find out exactly what ended up happening, but perhaps because of the efforts of the governor, we were not able to do that.
That's the problem with liberals. Like, we're too decent. You're trying to figure out, well, was there a reason? And we're not 100% sure that he covered it up. He was the governor and he leaned on public officials. But is that why they didn't investigate? Like,
maybe it was their first day.
This guy's like, oh yeah, Bernie Sanders is going to spend $18 trillion. It's like the North Koreans eating dogs.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the uneven playing field we live in America.
That's
where
true.
liberals try to be decent and reasonable and resort to facts, and the other side's like to punch you in the nuts and they say, you nut puncher.
As your nuts are literally still hurting from being punched. Okay. That's true. Yeah, perhaps I'm being too
Is that a thing? Is a nut puncher a thing? I think I might have made that up.
You say it, everybody knows what you mean, so it's a thing.